I'd like to introduce you to Sarah. And Sarah, at the time of this picture, is 5 years old and entering our system for the very first time. And the reason I want you to see Sarah is I want you to think about her cute little face that represents the curious, confident, and love of learning way that kids come into our system. And having been both an elementary and a secondary school principal, it saddens me to report that that face dissipates as you move up the grade levels. So hold that thought, because I'm going to share with you some things around how we can get that look on the face of all. I also want to introduce you to Ted. Ted was a teacher in the district where I was superintendent, and I was in Ted's class a lot. My favorite thing was to be in classrooms. And Ted would challenge me every single time I was in his classroom. He happens to be a futurist, that he's written some books, etc. But he'd ask me if I believed the first part of that little paragraph. I said, of course I believe the first part. World's changed, it's even changed for me. I can't believe how I'm different. I've developed a close personal friendship with Siri, and I didn't even know who she was 2 years from now, so of course I do. He said, do you believe in the second part? Absolutely. World's changing, we all know that. And then he would just look at me over his glasses and say, I'm not seeing that so much in our education systems. So I tend to like to use both Sarah and Ted as a call to action. And the call to action is, how do we get that face of Sarah on the face of all of our kids? And how do we start to align what we know and what we do? So I'm going to, obviously I don't have enough time to tell you everything we know, but suffice it to say we know a lot about learning. And so I've just picked a few, but I want you to keep these in your head for the second part of the presentation, where I'm going to introduce some ideas around how we could change things so it aligns with what we know. We know that kids come to us and that they learn in different ways and at different rates, and any teacher in the universe would say the range of kids in their classroom equals the number of kids that they teach. We know that. We also know that if kids need to see some sort of relevance or application to what it is we're trying to teach them, and as soon as they can see that, they will move from just knowing stuff to actually understanding things. We have to get our system to a place where kids start to answer this question, what did you learn in school today, with more than one word. And sadly, the word that is trending is nothing. So I think we can do better than that, and I've seen it. I've seen situations where teachers have done exciting things with kids, and parents would say, I can't get them to stop talking about what they learned today. And my response would be, that's the best problem you're ever going to have. That's what we're aiming for. We also know that kids need to see, or need to be engaged. And we actually did a student conference right here in Langley with Fraser Valley students of all kinds. So we brought together all kinds of kids and said, if you were in charge of us designing our education system, what would you say to us in terms of how we can get you more engaged? And they said, in a variety of different ways. In summary, there's 3 P's to answer that question. And they also said, if you feel the need to keep your 3 R's, feel free, but we'd like you to hear about our 3 P's. And the 3 P's were these. Passion was the first one. And they didn't just talk about help us find our passion. Once we found our passion, support us in following our passion. But they talked about, and be passionate as an adult, and the importance of that. And care about what I do, care about what my passion is. The second P was purpose. Show us why. Answer the question when we say, why are we having to learn this, with something other than because it's in the curriculum. And the third one was personalizing. One size doesn't fit all. And they said that loud and clear. So if one size doesn't fit all, it never has, it never will, why on earth would you set up an education system where you're trying to create a one size fits all? Always ask kids and you will get the answer. And so we're building all of this into our thinking. We also know that kids need to own their learning. So if they feel like education is something that's being done to them, the best you're going to get from them is compliant learning. And I have to tell you, I've shaken the hands of thousands of kids and talked to them after they've been through our system. And even those kids that had the 98.7294%, when you really talk to them, they were just compliant learners. They didn't get all jazzed up about their time in our system. They just did what they had to do to get what they thought they needed. So they need to own their learning. We also know that there's something very different that has happened in the last while, and it's called the introduction of technology and the internet, etc., etc. The world is completely different. We have a few people that still have their arms folded, and they're resisting the change. But I think it's suffice to say that the technology has changed it so that this too is not going to pass. And I think there are many ways that we could give as examples of that, but kids can get their learning in all sorts of different ways and places, etc. So my opinion is that as an education system, we need to figure out ways where we can embrace it and use it and help us engage kids and get them jazzed up about the time they're going to be with us. We also know that they come to us wired differently. They live in a completely different world. It's fast. They can multitask like nothing I've ever seen. They're used to choice. You just stand behind a teenager at the Starbucks counter and, I'm thinking cream and sugar, and they're thinking they've got a list this long. So they come from that world, right? And so we don't want to have an education system where we say, okay, but could you slow your brain down at the door? Or in some cases, turn it off at the door. We can do better than that. We also know problem solving is something that will engage kids more than anything else. And you just have to go into any kinds of inquiry-based kinds of classrooms and watch how they just are operating without the teacher. The teacher's just guiding them and walking around and learning things with them, especially if they've been able to select their own problem. And we also know that choice plays a huge role in learning. Give kids choice in what they're learning, then they engage, then they own. So here comes then the big question. Now we know what we know. So, when we know what we know, what should schooling look like? So I'm just going to suggest to you some things that I think we need to start wrapping our heads around and doing on purpose in a systemic way. Not just at the K-12 level, but through our entire learning systems, K-12, post-secondary. We need to develop an educational experience where we value learning regardless of where and when and how it took place. If you really think about just focusing on learning, why does it matter how long it took, where they learned it, how they learned it? If we just focus on learning, we need to devise a way in which the outside learning can actually be brought into their learning profile that we give them and have it count. We have to stop the madness where things like the national level athlete fails PE because they weren't there for the 12-minute run or the beep test. I can choose that because I was a PE teacher. I chose that on purpose. And I have to say I'm retroactively embarrassed at some of my own instructional practice because I just know so much more now. We also know that we need to embrace continuous growth and development. And what that really would mean is why do we have grade levels? What are they about? Those are something that were designed for a world that we no longer have. Ken Robinson says it's just a batching process. And if you really think about how kids learn, of course it is. What does how old you are have to do with what you might be able to know and do? We also have to start to embrace integrated learning and think about designing this on purpose in our systems. So for example, we have so many silos in education. I just started to think about, well, what are they? Well, they're classroom to classroom, they're school to school, they're ministry to ministry, they're course to course, and we design it that way on purpose. Where else would someone go, learn something for 80 minutes, stop, put that in your backpack, go over here, learn something different that's not connected to that, stop, backpack, and then go home and have to try to make some sort of connection out of all these pieces that actually don't connect? Why would we design it that way? And now that we know what we know, certainly how and why would we into the future? Competencies 21st century skills, learning how to communicate, being personally and socially responsible, thinking, those kinds of things. We need to flip what we do on its head and have competencies be the thing that we're really looking for, and using some kind of content in order to get to it, versus the other way around where, we can't talk about the tsunami in Japan because we have to cover Greece. Those kinds of things have to get changed in our thinking. And we have to value ongoing communication. We have this crazy thing called reporting periods. And they're no different in elementary than they are in secondary, but I can tell you this, learning shuts down during those times. There's no learning. Everybody's stressed. There's just angst throughout the building. Then you get this report card that's kind of like an autopsy report, because that's what you were doing and now we're moving on. And so we need to think about, why are we doing that now? We can just ongoing report, communicate, and encourage people to get better and better and better and better, because we have the tools and the technology to do that. We also know that kids learn when they're hands-on and it's experiential. Adults too. Every time I ask this question of people, name a time where you were so engaged in your learning you didn't want it to stop. Every time it'll come back with it was experiential, hands-on, almost always with someone else. So we know this. These are things we know. We're not guessing at this. When ways and rates of learning are personal, why on earth do we ask kids, yeah, but we're testing today, so we need you to, we know you're not going to be ready because you're learning at a different way at a different rate, but we're going to test you in the very same way at the very same time. Imagine if we could create a system where it was open to, it had space where it was personalized and kids could represent their learning in all sorts of different ways when they're ready. And this is going to be a shift for us, and there's going to be work around this. My opinion as a teacher, I'm so excited about just being able to coach and mentor and guide and get to know kids, but the identity of teacher is going to have to change. And we're going to have to work with teachers on that. It's a big deal to go in thinking this, and now your identity is going to be more of a coach and mentor versus a disseminator of information. We can't compete with Google. And so we need to start thinking of ourselves in a different role. And we also have to start putting way more of our focus on assessment for learning. That's how you get better and better and better and better at something. If you're thinking, I always use this as an example. We have two kids that we want to teach how to skate. And this is what skating looks like when they can do it. One kid gets here, falls down 5 times, and is now skating. Kid number 2, skating, falls, 50 times, but is now here skating. Does it matter how many times they fell down? Why do we do that? And we need to move ourselves to a proficiency-based thinking, kind of like they do in the Royal Conservatory of Music. It doesn't matter how old you are or what you've done, but when you can show that you're proficient at something, then you're proficient at it. Get your badge, move to the next thing. So we need to set up our systems like this on purpose. And it means we're going to need lots of space in curriculum, lots of space in graduation requirements, and lots of space for teachers to go wild and do what they do and seize the moment. That's how they're going to be able to also build relationships with kids, because they're not going to be so focused on covering the curriculum. So happily, we know we don't have a lot of classrooms that look like this anymore. But the point of this is, we have teachers doing great things, but they have to do workarounds. There's legislation and policy and rules and name it. That means they have to spend all of their time figuring out how they can work around it, and then often having to put all their great practice back into some box. So my suggestion is that we have to really start clearing the brush for teachers and kids to start working together in a way that we know is going to put us on the cutting edge for how education should look into the future. And we know this isn't going away. It just gets faster and faster and faster. So I think as an education system, look at the role we play. It's incumbent upon us to at least be keeping pace with what's going on in the outside world so that we actually know we're giving kids their best life chance for success. So here's what I think. I think we have to do this together. It takes a village to raise a child. Every one of us, in whatever role that we play, we have to grab what we know and start aligning it with what we do. And we want kids to get their best life chances from their experiences from us. And we want them to leave our system speaking about their time there with passion and pride. So my hope is that whatever our role is, that we embrace this journey. Kids deserve our best work. And we need to do what's right. And in my opinion, what's right is that you align everything with what you know about learning. So your systems, your structures, your day-to-day practice gets aligned with learning. And I really believe that if we do that, that face of Sarah will be on the faces of all kids in our system. Thank you.